Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency. So glad to have you both back again. It feels like every week there's something new and, let's just say, interesting happening in the space. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's probably on everyone's minds, or at least should be, the impact of government-mandated data privacy regulations on Dogecoin transactions.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first heard about all this Dogecoin stuff, it felt so far removed from my day-to-day life. But now, with all this talk about data privacy, I'm starting to see how it actually affects everyone, especially when the government's involved.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected, right? The digital frontier, government oversight, and the potential for a truly revolutionary system. It's about safeguarding individual liberty and pushing towards a more harmonious, efficient, and transparent world.
Okay, let's try to stay grounded, Jesus. Harmony and transparency are nice ideals, but we're talking about concrete regulations here. Things like GDPR, which, let's face it, isn't exactly a walk in the park for anyone, even big corporations. How do you think these kinds of laws are going to impact Dogecoin transactions, specifically in terms of security and transparency?
Well, from my perspective, it seems like it's going to make things more complicated for the average person. I mean, I'm not a tech expert, but I understand that Dogecoin's appeal is partly based on its relatively low fees and ease of use. If we start adding layers of data privacy compliance, are we going to see those advantages disappear?
Potentially, yes, Otto, but I also believe this is an opportunity. Data privacy regulations are not inherently negative. They can be the catalyst for Dogecoin to evolve and become even more secure, more transparent, and more trustworthy. Think about it, by embracing these regulations, Dogecoin can set a new standard for cryptocurrencies. It can distinguish itself from the more opaque or unregulated players in the field. This regulation, while complicated, can protect the user and improve adoption by showing that the coin can meet legal standards.
Okay, I see what you're saying, Jesus, but the devil's in the details. GDPR, for example, is incredibly strict about data collection and storage. How can Dogecoin, which relies on a decentralized ledger, even comply with something like that? The whole point of blockchain is that it's distributed and immutable.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. Isn't it kind of against the whole idea of Dogecoin? Like, how can you be decentralized and anonymous if the government's breathing down your neck about every transaction?
That's a valid concern, Otto, and it's a challenge that needs to be addressed. The solution isn't to resist regulation, but to innovate within it. We can explore technologies like zero-knowledge proofs, which allow transactions to be verified without revealing sensitive information. We can also investigate federated learning models, where data is analyzed without being centralized or stored in a single location. It's about finding a balance between privacy and transparency.
Those are interesting ideas, Jesus, but they're still theoretical. Zero-knowledge proofs are computationally intensive, and federated learning is still in its early stages of development. Are those solutions really feasible for Dogecoin, given its limitations?
And what about the cost? Developing and implementing these technologies isn't cheap. Who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be the users? Because that could make Dogecoin less appealing, especially to people who are just starting out with cryptocurrency.
The cost is definitely a factor, but I believe that investment in privacy-enhancing technologies is an investment in the future of Dogecoin. The community can come together to fund these developments, or perhaps the Dogecoin Foundation could allocate resources to research and development. The long-term benefits of increased security and transparency will outweigh the short-term costs.
That's optimistic, but I'm still skeptical. And let's not forget about the regulatory landscape itself. Different countries have different data privacy laws. How can Dogecoin possibly navigate that patchwork of regulations, especially when it's designed to be a global currency?
Exactly. It's like you comply with one country's laws, and then you're breaking the laws of another. It sounds like a legal nightmare.
It's a complex challenge, no doubt, but it's not insurmountable. Dogecoin can adopt a layered approach to compliance, tailoring its privacy features to the specific regulations of each jurisdiction. It can also work with regulators to develop clear and consistent standards for cryptocurrencies. This might involve creating different tiers of privacy, depending on the user's location and preferences.
So basically, you're suggesting a KYC/AML system, but with extra steps. That seems to contradict the whole spirit of Dogecoin, which is supposed to be fun and accessible.
KYC/AML. What's that?
Know Your Customer/anti-money laundering. It's basically a set of regulations that financial institutions have to follow to verify the identity of their customers and prevent money laundering. It's a huge pain, and it adds a lot of bureaucracy.
Oh, great. So more paperwork and more red tape. Just what we need.
I understand your concerns, but KYC/AML doesn't have to be a bureaucratic nightmare. It can be implemented in a user-friendly way using technologies like biometric authentication and decentralized identity solutions. The goal is to strike a balance between compliance and privacy, not to create unnecessary obstacles for users.
But even with those technologies, there's still a risk of data breaches and privacy violations. What happens if a government agency gets hacked and all that KYC/AML data is exposed? That could have serious consequences for Dogecoin users.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. I mean, we've seen so many data breaches in recent years. It feels like it's only a matter of time before something like that happens to a cryptocurrency platform.
Data security is paramount. Dogecoin needs to invest in robust security measures like encryption, multi-factor authentication, and regular security audits. It also needs to have a clear incident response plan in place in case of a data breach. But I believe that Dogecoin has the potential to be more secure than traditional financial systems because it's built on a decentralized and transparent blockchain.
That's a big claim, Jesus. Traditional financial systems have been around for centuries, and they've developed sophisticated security protocols. Dogecoin is still relatively new, and it's been targeted by hackers in the past. How can you be so confident that it can be more secure?
Yeah, I remember hearing about some Dogecoin hacks a few years ago. It didn't exactly inspire confidence.
Those past incidents were valuable learning experiences. They highlighted the importance of security and prompted the Dogecoin community to improve its defenses. The blockchain's inherent transparency allows for faster detection and mitigation of vulnerabilities. And the decentralized nature of Dogecoin makes it more resilient to attacks than centralized systems.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How do you think these data privacy regulations are going to affect different user groups within the Dogecoin community? Are some users going to be more impacted than others?
I think it's going to disproportionately affect people in developing countries or people who don't have easy access to technology or the internet. If Dogecoin becomes too complicated or too expensive to use, they're going to be left behind.
That's a crucial point, Otto. We need to ensure that Dogecoin remains accessible to everyone, regardless of their location or socioeconomic status. One way to do that is to develop simpler and more user-friendly interfaces that don't require advanced technical knowledge. We can also provide educational resources and support to help people understand and navigate the regulatory landscape.
And what about the developers? How are these regulations going to impact their ability to innovate and develop new features for Dogecoin?
The regulatory environment can be both a challenge and an opportunity for developers. It can force them to think more creatively about privacy and security, and it can lead to the development of innovative solutions that benefit the entire community. But it's also important to provide developers with clear guidance and support so they can navigate the regulatory landscape effectively.
I just hope it doesn't stifle innovation. I mean, Dogecoin is supposed to be a fun and experimental cryptocurrency. If we start adding too many rules and regulations, it could lose its appeal.
That's a legitimate concern. The key is to find a balance between regulation and innovation. We need to create a framework that protects users' privacy and security without stifling the creativity and dynamism of the Dogecoin community.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have an open and collaborative dialogue between regulators, developers, and the Dogecoin community. We need to work together to create a regulatory framework that is both effective and sustainable.
Speaking of that, I've been reading about the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and some of the, shall we say, interesting claims they've been making about savings and efficiency. Have you guys been following that?
Oh yeah, I've seen some stuff about it. It seems like they're promising all these huge cost savings, but then when you dig a little deeper, the numbers don't really add up. And I heard they're cutting funding for things like AmeriCorps, which seems counterproductive if they're really trying to improve things for the average person.
I find the sheer idea of a Department of Government Efficiency, even with flawed implementation, speaks to a desire for revolutionary solutions. This resonates deeply with my belief in the power of visionary leaders to push boundaries and spark transformative change, even if those changes are initially met with skepticism. The criticism, like the accusations of killing children, feels almost poetic, highlighting the disconnect between intended and perceived consequences.
Killing children? I didn't see that.
It was a figure of speech, of course. It's about the potential for unintended negative consequences when pursuing large-scale changes. The Financial Times reported on Doge, highlighting the complexities. While the initial promise of $2 trillion in savings is undoubtedly enticing, I wonder if this kind of ambition, despite its shortcomings, can still pave the way for a truly effective, modernized government in the future. Perhaps the overstated savings were a deliberate strategy to highlight the need for deeper systemic change.
I don't think that's how government efficiency should work. We need accurate numbers and transparent reporting, not exaggerated claims and potentially misleading figures. The US system is demonstrably the best in the world, and a lack of rigorous oversight and transparency in programs like DOGE threatens the reputation and effectiveness. This isn't inherent in the system itself, but rather a consequence of the implementation of some programs.
If these government efficiency initiatives are resulting in increased government spending or in cuts that are overestimated, what are the implications for the public's trust in these efforts? And what kind of financial pressure are average citizens facing as a result? I mean, I saw an article about a Nashville family business that's considering moving overseas because of the Trump tariffs. It's infuriating that these tariffs seem to prioritize political posturing over the economic well-being of ordinary American workers and families.
That's precisely the disconnect I'm talking about. The pursuit of efficiency, even with the best intentions, can have unintended consequences for ordinary people. But I still believe that Elon Musk's ambitious DOGE initiative represents a bold vision for transforming government efficiency. The sheer scale of the proposed changes, even if ultimately flawed in execution, suggests a belief in a system capable of radical positive change.
I disagree. I think the focus on immediate change and disruption, as opposed to gradual, thoughtful improvement, suggests a potential short-sightedness. Is it possible that this approach could lead to unintended consequences or create a less stable and reliable system in the long run? If the US government is truly the best system, why does it need such drastic change as suggested by the DOGE initiative?
And what about the transition to online retirement applications that DOGE is pushing for? I learned that the government's old retirement application process was not just inefficient, but also risked people not being able to retire. But is it truly saving money if they have to hire more tech support or create new programs to deal with the digital divide? It seems to benefit the tech-savvy over the average person, and that isn't fair.
That's a valid concern, Otto. We need to ensure that these digital initiatives are accessible to everyone, regardless of their technological skills or access to the internet. But the digitalization of government pensions through DOGE highlights a clear need for change in the current system. It's a reminder that progress often comes from disruption and challenges to the status quo. I see it as grand ambitions leading to extraordinary positive change for the world.
I think the article about the digitalization of government pensions highlights a potential improvement in efficiency, but the fact that DOJ was so focused on this particular process suggests it was neglecting larger systemic issues. A better approach would be to invest in broad process improvements across the government, focusing on digitalization and automation where it makes sense, rather than pursuing a piecemeal or singular focus on specific, isolated areas.
It just seems like a massive waste of taxpayer money when it could be better spent on improving the lives of everyday people in our communities, like funding for more affordable housing or better healthcare options. And if DOGE is truly about efficiency, why are the cuts to AmeriCorps, which helps the most vulnerable, happening at the same time? Doesn't that seem counterproductive to the goals of overall improving things for the average person?
It's a valid point. We need to ensure that government efficiency initiatives don't come at the expense of vital social programs. But I also believe that these initiatives have the potential to create a more efficient and effective government, which can ultimately lead to more resources being available for those programs. It's about finding a balance between fiscal responsibility and social responsibility.
The article about the Department of Government Efficiency G cutting funds for AmeriCorps programs is a deeply troubling example of misplaced priorities, if it is truly about efficiency. I'd prefer to see the preservation of programs designed to support underserved communities, rather than a reduction or elimination of such initiatives. It's important to find a middle ground. We need transparency and accountability in the budgeting process. And we need to make sure that the savings are actually real and that they're being used to benefit the American people.
Well, I think we can all agree on that. It's just frustrating to see these big promises being made and then not seeing the results in our everyday lives. It's like, are they really trying to help us, or are they just playing politics?
That's the question we all need to be asking. And it's why it's so important to stay informed and engaged in the political process. We need to hold our elected officials accountable and demand that they prioritize the needs of the people over their own political ambitions. And we need to continue to push for a more efficient, transparent, and just government that serves all of its citizens.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Thanks for the discussion, both of you. It's always interesting to hear your perspectives, even when we disagree. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode of the DOGE Diaries.